in order to elevate one's consciousness. So all these things are actually completely material and have nothing to do with any spiritual process, intrinsically, any intrinsic spiritual process. It's a means to get there, but it's not the ultimate end. And so here, the Prabhupada is mentioning that one should not follow such a system. It is not recommended. The practice of Jada Yoga was possible for Rishabhdev and others on the same level of perfection, but such an uncommon practice is impossible for any other man. So one should not, however, imitate Emperor Rishabhdev. He should not imitate the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his activities or any other great personality who has achieved such thing. Just like we have Vangshidas Babaji, he's a Paramahamsa. A Paramahamsa on that platform, you will see that he doesn't particularly follow the rules and regulations of what is recommended in Shastra sometimes. He will do things that are very quite out of the norm, avaduta, very extrinsic, very hard to understand. A personality is very difficult to understand. Just like if you read about Vangshidas Babaji and without a proper understanding through our acharyas or through other great devotees who recognize, then it would be very difficult for us neophytes to understand that actually this personality is completely transcendental. He is actually completely situated on the platform of this Brahma Bhuta. He is completely situated on the platform of devotional service. So it is very difficult for one to actually see who is saintly and who is unsaintly, who actually for a person to see that who is actually a real saint. But this practice in general is not recommended. And we can understand that Rishabhdev was obviously the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but by the display of his instructions towards his sons of devotional service and how to perfect one's human life, you can understand that he was a Paramahamsa. That he wasn't just some crazy man running around, just like we have some Paramahamsas that live in Atlanta. We have Shukadev, we call him Shukadev because he's always reading the Bhagavad Gita and he's always screaming the Bhagavad Gita out on the street crazily. He was doing that yesterday too. And I think Chandan Prabhu saw him and he was like, look, that guy's reading the Bhagavad Gita. I'm like, no, that guy's crazy. He's insane. There's some other people around, just like, if you go to Midtown Atlanta, you'll see some so-called Paramahamsas by the descriptions of some of the descriptions, you could say, not all of them. I saw one says, like there's the python that comes in the Bhagavatam. He just lays there, doesn't do anything, he's a Paramahamsa. And similarly, if you go into Atlanta, once I saw this fat lady. She was homeless and she was just lying there, and everything would come to her. People would bring her food, people would bring her drinks, and she would be sleeping half the time, she would look very dumb, very dirty. But factually you can understand that they have no realization of anything else, but they're actually just lazies and crazies. And so seemingly the Paramahamsas also fall into that category externally. For one who is not actually has the proper vision, he cannot see that. He'll just see the Paramahamsa as a lazy and crazy because at least what it's described here, that's what it seems like. But Prabhupada mentions that it is only other advanced saintly person would be able to recognize such things. So on that basis, just like we accept, we would have no idea about Vangshidas Babaji, therefore we accept the authority of our spiritual master, of Bhaktivikas Maharaj, in describing that he's a Paramahamsa, and we respect that. And when we read those descriptions, sometimes you're like, oh my God, it's a little shocking, like wow, it's like he really did these things. And it's very hard to understand how this is proper. But we have to understand, as our spiritual master says in some of these questions and answers, sometimes we just have to understand that we can't understand everything. And so therefore we accept the authority of acharyas. We accept the authorities of other saintly persons, of great saintly persons who have that vision. So the real purpose of Jada Yoga, as mentioned here in this verse, is prashanta karanaha, or subduing the senses. The whole process of yoga, under whatever heading it may be, is to control the unbridled material senses and thus prepare for self-realization. In this age specifically, this Jada Yoga cannot be of any practical value, but on the other hand, the practice of Bhakti Yoga is feasible because it is just suitable for this age. The simple method of hearing from the right source, Srimad Bhagavatam, lead one to the highest perfection stage of yoga. Rishabdev was the son of the king of Nabhi and the grandson of King Agnidra, and he was the father of the king Bharat, after whose name is the planet Earth was Bharatvarsha. So Prabhupada mentions here that simply this Jada Yoga is only meant for the purpose of subduing one's senses. Therefore, we read in Rishabdev's teachings, as I'm pretty sure everybody in this room has read, because I'm sure all of you would have read some of the first book you would have read was Spiritual Yoga. He says that, my dear boys, of all the living entities who have accepted material bodies in this world, one who has been awarded this human form, should not work hard day and night simply for sense gratification, which is available even for hogs and dogs that eat stool. One should engage in penance and austerity to attain the divine position of devotional service. By such activity, one's heart is purified, and when one attains this position, he attains eternal blissful life, which is transcendental to material happiness and which continues forever. So Rishabdev, he specifically mentioned that one should not be like the hogs, dogs. Often camels and asses are also included in that. That this sense gratification is even available to these living entities. So one should not simply just run towards that, but one should be very intelligent to engage in penance and austerity. And so Prabhupada writes a few things here, that the word Dehabhak refers to anyone who accepts a material body, but the living entity who is awarded the human form of life must act differently from animals. Animals like dogs and hogs enjoy sense gratification by eating stool. After undergoing severe hardships all day, human beings are trying to enjoy themselves at night by eating, drinking, having sex, and sleeping. At the same time, they are properly defending themselves. However, this is not human civilization. Human life means voluntarily practicing suffering for the advancement of spiritual life. There is, of course, suffering in the lives of animals and plants, which are suffering due to their past deeds. However, human beings should voluntarily accept suffering in the form of austerity and penances in order to attain the divine life. After attaining the divine life, one can enjoy happiness eternally. After all, every living entity is trying to enjoy happiness. But as long as one is engaged in the material body, he has to suffer different kind of miseries. A higher sense is present in human form. We should act according to superior device in order to attain eternal happiness and go back to Godhead. So the control of the senses is very important, and that is specifically done by austerities and penances. As we see generally the tradition of Vedic culture is that one engages in these austerities and penances. The austerities of restraining oneself from these four activities: eating, drinking, four regulative principles, that one, illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, and what am I forgetting here? Meat eating. One restrains from these things and that is a level of austerity. And he engaging in penances. He undergoes different sacrifices. He performs those sacrifices. He tries to come to the platform of self-realization, not be like the hogs and dogs in society. So Rishabdev is particularly attacking that, because that is the general tendency of the human society at large. That is our general tendency. And Prabhupada specifically mentions here that one has to voluntarily accept suffering. So what does that mean when we get involuntary suffering? That the yogis generally undergo voluntary suffering, as is described in Jada Yoga. But we already do this, there's the aparabdha karma and parabdha karma. There's karma that is not manifested yet, and that which is also manifested. What is this? This is the words that I use: prarabdha and aparabdha. Prarabdha and aparabdha. So these two karmas, we're destined to suffer these things. So Prabhupada he doesn't even mention that. One is actually already due, one is already expected to suffer, but then Prabhupada is saying that one should actually voluntarily accept suffering also. So as we're not accustomed to this idea of suffering, that actually the idea in the Western world is like you constantly run away from it, try to get away from it. But Prahlad Maharaj says, don't do that. Don't endeavor in this way. That actually, just like miseries come, happiness will come on its own. But if we endeavor to run away from our own suffering, actually you'll only suffer more. So one should simply accept what karma he is due, and then he can also accept upon himself. He may accept more suffering, but within the Krishna consciousness movement, we understand that is not required. That is not exactly required to undergo this Jada yoga like the yogis. One should voluntarily accept suffering can also mean taken to mean that whatever suffering he gets, he should not despise it, he should welcome it. Okay, this is my past. As my spiritual master often recites, that when Brahma prays that, oh my Lord, let me suffer all my past reactions. I'm simply awaiting. I'll simply tolerate these things. And because I know if I just wait this out, that devotional service is my rightful claim. That liberation becomes my rightful claim by just tolerating such things and remaining fixed in devotional service. So in devotional service, we undergo a lot of suffering, so we should accept that as the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and not be disturbed by them. So it is important to understand this point, that suffering is a part of life, and one should not try to avoid it. One should accept it as it comes, not that one goes out of the way to suffer. One should voluntarily accept suffering that is there. But in Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada mentions here that one need not go such austerities. One doesn't need to go under these things. He said, the simple method of hearing from the right source, Srimad Bhagavatam, will lead one to the highest perfectional stage of yoga. This is the important thing. That all these things are there, that one can undergo austerities and penance, and that is there in brahmachari life naturally. Naturally there is the level of austerity and penances that are required. But one doesn't need to put on any extra burden on his back, like sometimes we've seen in our own lives. Some devotees are like, okay, I'm only going to sleep 4 hours a day. And I'm going to chant 64 rounds. I'm going to read for 3 hours a day. And then I'm also, on top of that, I'm going to perform all my other services. I'm not going to take a nap in the day. But this is foolish, because we've seen the result of such things is that it's actually not beneficial for Krishna consciousness. It is not favorable for Krishna consciousness, although performing the principles of devotional service, of chanting, hearing, serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because it is done without a proper understanding, it actually doesn't lead to a higher platform, but actually degrades one. Because it is done in the mode of passion and ignorance. Being ignorance of one's abilities, of one's limitations, of what the body can handle. And so a devotional service has to be undertaken with right source. The right source, Srimad Bhagavatam, is the Bhagavatam. This is the book Bhagavatam, and then there's the person Bhagavatam. So it has to be done with reference with both, in guidance of both, not just done in reference of one's own whim. Okay, I read the Srimad Bhagavatam, Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtanam, or Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, this. Okay, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, I just have to read 24 hours a day. But that's not what that is. Eternal service to the Srimad Bhagavatam also means that service to the pure devotees, service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so the spiritual master, he engages you in that service, not that you get to choose what service you get to engage in. This is very important to understand. that the spiritual master he decides because he knows. He engages the disciple in the service. Even sometimes we may not know what that service is. Sometimes we think like this, like that, but the spiritual master says, no, you do this. I want this. I want you to do this. I want you to do this. My own experience, like in reference to this Harinam, we like 3 times he told us. And first time like maybe we have this to do, that to do. Second time he was like we have this to do, that to do. And then he said a third time, and I'm like okay. And definitely myself, I was very reluctant towards that because there's like okay, I want to do all these other things. We have to travel and we want to go to universities and try to make new men because we need to continue doing that. But he was very, even though I explained that to him, he was like, no, still you should go out. And now looking back, I can see, I'm like, okay, like those instructions were very valuable in that my spiritual master pushed me to do that and pushed that service upon me, although I couldn't see like what the result of it was. He said more men will come. And more men will come as a result of the performance of Sankirtan Yajna. But for my own self, being able to do that every day, going out on the street and chanting, I've seen a huge difference in my spiritual life. The cessation of this Rajastamo Gune Era Sabayachana, Prabhupada says in his prayers, in his prayers that he composed, Markini Bhagavad Dharma. So in this he says like that all these people are affected by that, but how can they overcome? By constant hearing of the Srimad Bhagavatam and by engaging in that service. So Bhagavatam doesn't just mean just reading. It means engaging in that service, and by doing that, this tada rajas tamo bhava, this infliction of this tama and rajas, which does not allow us to attain any level of devotional service, I mean, at some level, or allow us to come to a perfection of devotional service. Prabhupada says that one cannot understand this, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the absolute truth, without being situated at least on the platform of moral goodness. Coming out of Rajas and Tamas, he says. One cannot study Srimad Bhagavatam in Rajas and Tamagun. He will not be able to understand anything. But how to come out of it? By constantly hearing, by engaging in service. So the simple method of hearing right from the source. Simple. So Prabhupada, he's mentioning this, and then he mentions what we spoke about in the beginning of the lineage of Rishabdev. So all these things are there. Here that Rishabdev, this Jada Yoga, he's displaying, and we take this pastime of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and because it is very instructive in how we should perform our own lives and how we can come to this platform of detachment and tolerance, and how we should do that, and that should be done not in the way that it was done, not imitating Rishabdev, but by following the instructions of the Srimad Bhagavatam, by following the instructions of the pure devotee. And simply by doing that, it will lead us to the highest stage of life. That is the purpose. That is engaging in book distribution, engaging in chanting our rounds in the morning, engaging in hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, being attentive to these things. If we give those things the most importance in our lives, specifically chanting your rounds and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, our lives become completely easy. Prabhupada says that. He says, because this is the instructions of the spiritual master. By simply being situated on that platform, devotion service becomes very easy. You're finding it tough, you're finding it hard, go back to the basics. As Prabhupada Guru Maharaj was mentioning in one lecture, that if you don't know, if everything fails, follow the instructions. Follow the instructions. Because it's guaranteed. If we're not inspired in devotion service, if we're not feeling enlivened, if we're having a tough time, then be absorbed in reading the Bhagavatam, be absorbed in your service. Just become regulated. Krishna says this is very important. On the mode of goodness, one has happiness and knowledge. And so regulation is a symptom of motor goodness. And so if we can just simply become regulated, chant the same amount of rounds every morning. Attend the whole morning program, go to sleep at the same time in the morning and evening, in the afternoon, whatever, when you take a nap. Do this every day. Just become fixed in a particular service, become fixed in doing everything on time, then you'll see everything change. Then you see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, He Himself, He'll inspire us. He'll help us overcome this mode of passion and ignorance. Prabhupada says that only you, my Lord, in that prayer, says only you can remove all these things if you desire. So if we can invoke that benediction, if we can invoke the benediction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then it becomes very easy. And that's done by pleasing the spiritual master. So, as we chant every morning, Yasya Prasadat Bhagavat Prasado, that by pleasing the spiritual master, you please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, yesterday, what's interesting is I was reading the Servant of the Servant. I'm mentioning this because this is the first time I came across this in my life. And it was mentioned by Tamal Krishna Maharaj that one devotee was praying to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to be able to please his own spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada chastised him, told him, you do not do this. This is not the right thing to do. You're overstepping your guru. You're trying to put yourself on the platform of the guru. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj writes, this is Mayavad. This is symptoms of Mayavad, because one puts himself on the platform of his own spiritual master, then what is not to say? Who is not to say that he'll put himself on the platform of Krishna? So it is very important to understand your spiritual master. And he's following Srila Prabhupada, that your spiritual master is the only consideration of your life. He is the first person that you pray to. He's the person that you serve. He's your first consideration, as Prahlad Maharaj says in his prayers, that, oh my Lord, you're here, but actually, my spiritual master, he's the first one to serve. Sorry, I cannot do anything else. I don't know what else to do. I have to serve him. I'm sorry, my Lord. So similarly, the mood of the disciple is that he follows his spiritual master. He follows his spiritual master. Yes, we follow Srila Prabhupada, but it specifically should be engraved in the disciple that my spiritual master, I'm following his orders with the line of Srila Prabhupada. And that is how one actually serves the spiritual master, not with the idea that sometimes we have that false idea within our own movement that, and I have probably had this to some extent, that there's like our guru, but then there's like Srila Prabhupada. This is very prominent, and that's why I never really understood it in the beginning, in the first couple of years, that, okay, your guru is there, but ultimately, it's like you accept Srila Prabhupada as the guru, and your guru is just there as a part of initiation. But this is a false idea. One actually accepts the guru completely. He's the be-all and end-all of one's life, actually. He actually completely surrenders onto the guru with a proper understanding. So if one simply serves one spiritual master, then he will be completely situated on the platform of devotional service. He will have no problems at all. Whatever problems he come, he just takes it as the service of the spiritual master. He takes it upon his back. He takes it as the burden that he needs to take in order to serve the spiritual master. Prabhupada says the disciple would rather die than fail to fulfill the mission of the spiritual master. That's how a disciple should feel. And we see that in different lines. We see that in the mood of Srila Prabhupada and what he was able to accomplish by that, simply by that dedication to his spiritual master. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur the same. In the Sri Vaishnava line, we have so many beautiful examples of Acaryas that are so wholly and solely dedicated to their spiritual master. So a saintly person, he is actually the goal of our life. He is by coming to that association, that is the perfection of our life. And Rishabdev actually says that later on here in the 5th canto when he's instructing his sons here. So, all my sons, you should accept a highly elevated Paramahansa as spiritually advanced spiritual master. In this way, you should place your faith and love in me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You should detest sense gratification, tolerate the dualities of pleasure and pain, which are like the seasonal changes of summer and winter. So he gives all these instructions here. So he specifically, this is one of his actually okay, that's actually come. So he specifically mentions that one should search out that Paramahansa and engage in that service of that Paramahansa. That is the process of by which one can completely come to the platform of self-realization. So that is our position, that in all these different types of yogas and all this are there, but we accept Srimad Bhagavatam as the absolute truth and we follow that, and it's a simple process, simple for the simple. So by distributing it, by glorifying it, by engaging in that service of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we can easily overcome all the difficulties of life, of spiritual life or material life, and come to the platform of perfection. It takes tolerance, it takes humility, it takes a level of austerity, but it's possible. The only thing standing in our way is our own minds. Okay, I'll end my class there. If there's any questions or comments, please feel free to ask.
In this, just wanted to say, a comment or question. It's a comment actually. I want to add something regarding this. Every incarnation has opulences and all. They exhibit certain opulences of the Supreme Lord and other incarnation. But here Prabhupada writes about Jada Yoga as exhibited. But if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you see, he exhibited Prema Yoga.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was trying to tell is that I want to add to that, because sometimes, as you said, newly devotees, they go, some people, they go to India and then they see these so many Naga Babas in Rishikesh and all this. But that's one thing. But if in Krishna consciousness also, if devotees not have proper understanding, there's so many problems, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's disappearance or leaving from this world, movement has become more or less like Babaji and all. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur had to write a big articles about perils of Babaji life and all. The point is that even those who are initiated now, then they go to Vrindavan, specifically Vrindavan, and they visit this Radha Kund, all these places. They are attacked by Mahans, Babajis, and I don't know, there are some people in such a way that Prabhupada is only giving little, ISKCON book distribution is just this one, so you should get Siddha Pranali, all these things. So these, I wrote, they visit and they associate with these devotees, and they say that Prabhupada is not a Premi Bhakta, and then you have to come to the level of Prema, because that is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given. So that this Maharaj explains in, there is a lecture by Maharaj that even Paramahamsas follow the rules and regulations. There is a lecture by Maharaj, even Paramahamsas follow. So we can hear that.
Okay.
And one more thing I want to just tell is that regarding this Rishabdev, there is a religion called Jainism in India, which has started just after Rishabdev's leaving this planet. There was one king, it is mentioned in the 5th canto, chapter 6, 40th shloka. If you want, you can pull. It is written very clearly that there was one person called Arhat, there is a king, who heard the pastimes of Rishabdev and just imitated. They have this king called, they say Arihant. If you see, if you go to be to India or here, Jains are very rich. They are called as Arihant Electronics. This is very famous. In Salem also it is there. We go for collection and all. So they are all Jains. So yeah, the point is that they are called Jains and they imitate just like Rishabdev. They give up and they become like naked and they walk. Even they are Jains who are filthy rich diamond merchants in Surat and all. They throw diamonds when they are walking, naked. It's that much rich they are. So that much renowned. So just I wanted to add this.
Thank you. Mahotsav, we have some question.
Yeah.
You have you have something? You have.
Anyways, there's only 1 minute left. I have my WhatsApp call.
Please leave your
Okay.
No connection.
Anyways, they're in the mountains somewhere. So
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
You're on the screen.
I can say after you. Whatever you have to say, you please say.
It's okay. There's only 1 minute left. Say.
So go ahead. You can say yours. Okay?
No, there's no time to argue here. What I wanted to say was that this point that you made about us not accepting suffering, in Krishna consciousness there is no need. See, a little clarification is required in that regard. I mean, Prabhupada is saying one should accept suffering. I mean, that's also for devotees. But the way in which we accept suffering is we accept suffering for the sake of advancing in Krishna consciousness. For instance, if one has to only take Krishna Prasadam, that is one form of accepting suffering, actually, because you can't go eat anything and everything, and it becomes very difficult in certain circumstances and situations. You have to fast, you have to.
Is that more
you
of
don't have
austerity
anything.
than suffer?
Austerity is suffering.
Suffering. Yes.
With austerity comes little suffering. Prabhupada said our austerity is no meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling. With that also comes some level of suffering is there. But that's all. That's all that we accept. So this is how we accept that suffering, by accepting the principles of devotional service. Some level of suffering becomes automatically, yeah.
Or sometimes you may.
But not that, more than that is not required, is the point. But
Again.
there is, one should accept suffering, otherwise one may think, why should I eat only Krishna Prasadam? It's actually, it's a big suffering, especially for grihasthas. Those who are working outside in this, is very difficult.
I guess as
to be
brahmachari, we don't
followed.
really like. I don't really think
Even as
about this so
brahmachari,
much.
sometimes you can be put in certain circumstances and situations where you're just having to just eat nuts and nothing else, and sometimes even those nuts are not, you can't find anything really, So if you haven't been, then you're fortunate.
Yeah.
That's good. But there are situations like that.
Also, I guess voluntary accepting suffering. Also, sometimes we go out on book distribution, and you go out in the van, and it's hot, and it's just like you can't do anything about it. Sometimes it's like you can't.
many things,
You got to get out in the heat. It's like 100 degrees, and you're thirsty. You're sweating. You're hungry. It's just like you've been out on books for 3 days. It's like, especially the marathon time, that's like a voluntary suffering like anything. You wait. Huh? Marathon time?
It's cold, yeah.
It's cold, yeah, it's cold. Well, now I'm saying, now in the marathon time also, it's like you don't sleep enough. Like in marathon time, you come back home at 9 o'clock, you take prasadam, you sleep, you wake up and you can't even open your eyes. You look in the mirror like, oh my God. And then you go out again at 9 o'clock right after breakfast. So yeah, I didn't mention that point. So anything else? Okay.
Because these Babajis which imitate Bhaktivedanta Thakur and Prabhupada, and even His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Maharaj in many of his lectures, he says that there are real Babajis who actually they may, like, Vamshidas Babaji, you have read, they may smoke marijuana or tobacco or something. But main important thing is that they never associate with women. This particular point. But if you see the Babaji's, Bhaktivedanta Thakur was very against. Whoever has not undergone illicit sex within a month, and the police is standing, and his spiritual master's body is there, and he's challenging the whole Vrindavan. That within a month, in Navadvip, within a month, nobody has done illicit sex. You can touch the body of my spiritual, this Gaurkishore Das Babaji. Then he takes down 15 days. And then he keeps down within a week. And then he keeps down within a day. And then he goes on. He said, just before day, nobody. And then Bhaktivedanta Thakur carries him. So that is the level of austerity which... There are 3 Babajis in the Gaudiya Vaishnava. Who are they? Jagannath Das Babaji, Vamshidas Babaji, and Gaurkishore Babaji. That's all.
Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.